All right, 2024 is long gone, so I thought, hey, why don't we take a look back at some of the action films of last year and do a little bit of a ranking today? And, I'm going to do something a little different with this episode in that I'm not going to rank these action movies as like a whole. I'm not going to talk about the screenplay or the acting or the cinematography. I'm just going to rank these action films based on their action. So just because something is, lower on the list doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the movie. It just means the action in the movie didn't do it for me, or vice versa. So yeah, I'm going to rank the action in these action films, and so buckle up, settle in, and let's rank some action from 2024. All right, in typical fashion, I'm going to go out of order. I'm just going to pick at random. So let's start with Gladiator II. Yes, Ridley Scott's back. And, I wasn't crazy about this movie. I thought it was fine. It was basically just a remake of the first movie, which is kind of a bummer. But in terms of the action, I would argue that the action in the first movie is better than the action in this movie. I think the chariot race from the first Gladiator is better than anything in this movie. I don't know, the action in this movie just didn't quite do it for me. I mean, it's kind of fun, I suppose, like when they flood the Colosseum with the boats and the shark. That was kind of cool. The monkey fight was obnoxious and ridiculous. I hated that monkey fight. The action that opens the film was like that skirmish, that battle. Was just fine. You don't really know any of these characters yet, so it's just kind of like, okay. The rhino fight scene was pretty fun, but overall, like, there's nothing about the action in this movie that makes me want to rewatch this movie. So, but it wasn't like bad. I don't think that anything in this movie is terrible, or aside from that monkey one. That one was bad. But the other ones, I thought they were fine. They just didn't engross me as much as some of the action did in the first movie. So Gladiator 2, as far as action goes, I'm going to put it in the C. Yeah. Again, I just don't think there's anything in this movie that's like, oh, I need to go back and revisit Gladiator 2 because of this action, set piece. There just wasn't anything that I thought that really stood out. So it's going in the C, baby. Okay, next up, everyone's favorite Rebel Moon Part 2. Yeah, I not only hated this movie, but I also hated the action. Like, it took a whole movie to build up to this big set piece in this movie, and I could have fallen asleep and not even cared. Like the action in this movie is so boring and dull. It was so bad. Like, I mean, I guess it's fine, I suppose, if you're into that kind of thing, but the big action set piece was just long. It was like nothing was really all that exciting. There was really no stakes. I didn't care about anyone. I didn't care about what was happening. It is like the worst, thing that can happen in an action scene, which is that you don't care what's going on. And I felt that way throughout the whole movie. Like, the action in Rebel Moon Part 2 was just nothing. Like, it was really bad. So we're going to put Rebel Moon Part 2 in the D. Okay, now let's do Deadpool and Wolverine. So this might be a controversial ranking because on one hand, I think that the action in this movie is fun. Like, I think that, and that's what they're going for. They're going for fun. And to me, like, action that stands out to me, or action that has like some gravitas to it, like you're invested, you're on the edge of your seat. And I never really felt that way about Deadpool Wolverine. I just thought it was just a fun action film. And I think my biggest gripe with the action in this film is that the director relies heavily on needle drop music to make their action seem cool. I think every single major action set piece in this movie has music set to it. The opening has NSYNC. The moment where Wolverine and Deadpool fight is set to Hell's Bells. The fight in the car, I think, is Grease Lightning. And then, obviously, Like a Prayer at the end with that long dolly shot that's going down the street. Like, every action scene in this movie, like, shoehorns in a bunch of music. And again, I think conceptually it's fun. It is fun to watch. It's fun to look at. But, like, when I reflect on this movie about, like, oh, I want to watch this for the action, like, there's no action set piece in this movie that makes me want to rewatch this. What makes me want to rewatch this is actually more the performances than anything, and the comedy. The action is just kind of secondary for me personally. Like, it didn't really do it for me. I didn't find any of the action in this movie to be very memorable. That being said, I know I'm not ranking, movies as a whole. Like I said, I think Deadpool Wolverine is a fun movie. I think I would probably rate it in the B. But in terms of action and what I'm looking for, I'm actually gonna go C. Like the action just did not do it for me. I like the movie, but the action in this movie was not my cup of tea. And I'm probably alone on that. I'm sure you're probably watching this. I'm sure there's a lot of people that love the action, and that's why they went back and watched it again, is to experience those set pieces. But for me, I just felt like a lot of the action was kind of just like, it was fun, it was fine, it was whatever. And it kind of frustrates me because I feel like some of the action could have been memorable. Like the moment when Deadpool and Wolverine are fighting for the first time, if you remember, it's set to Hell's Bells, but the Hell's Bells cuts in and out of that scene. So like Hell's Bells will be playing, and then all of a sudden the music cuts away, and they're exchanging blows, and then on contact, Hell's Bells kicks back in. And as I was watching it and watching them fight in silence, I was like, this is awesome. Like, why did you have to include Hell's Bells? Like, why did you have to rely on Hell's Bells to like elevate the scene? Because I guarantee you, if that scene as it stands with no music, just the sound effects and their grunting and their performances, if you just would have kept it silent, that would have been a memorable fight scene. That would have been like, you don't have to rely on AC/DC. You're watching Wolverine fight Deadpool. Like, you don't need music. Sure, you could probably use a score. And I think that would be kind of a good common ground. But yeah, it was just like the whole time as AC/DC's blasting out, I'm like, why are you relying on this? Like, this would have been a cool, like, big moment if you took that music away. But that's just me personally. That's just my take. Again, I may be alone on this one, but hey. It's going in the C. But again, I like the movie. I would have ranked it higher if we were talking about the movie as a whole. But in terms of just the action, it was fine. All right, now let's talk about Kill. So yeah, if you guys don't know and haven't heard of this, it's basically a movie that takes place on a train, almost entirely on a train, where a bunch of bad guys kidnap this guy's wife and take her to a part of the train, and he's kind of like going through the whole train to get her back. It gets a little more complicated than that, but I don't want to spoil anything here. But Kill is awesome. Kill is one of my favorite action scenes of the year. This movie has so many good fight scenes. And like, I didn't really expect that going in, because the whole movie takes place on a train. And like, it's such a closed environment. Like, how are you going to have like really cool, fun, inventive like fight scenes in such a small location? And man, was I wrong. They use every single square inch of this train, and they use it to great effect. There's like great choreography. It gets very brutal. It starts kind of like John Wicky, fun choreography, but towards the middle of the movie, it gets bloody and violent and just over the top. And I was just like, this is insane. This is by far some of the best action this year. I want to rewatch it just for the action alone. I mean, most of it is just action. There's not a whole lot of plot here. But to me, Kill was fantastic when it comes to action. I'm giving Kill an A. Kill deserves that A spot. Okay, next up is The Beekeeper. You guys remember The Beekeeper? This one came out January 2024, so it's basically been a whole year since this movie came out. This movie's fine when it comes to action. It's a Jason Statham, fight movie. Again, nothing in this movie really like stood out, but it is fun to see Jason Statham, whoop some ass. But yeah, nothing in this movie I was like, oh, I need to rewatch The Beekeeper right away because that one set piece was so incredible. I need to experience that again. Like, all the action in this movie was very serviceable. It was fine. It was, good choreography. It was shot fairly well. But yeah, it wasn't like, it didn't blow me away. You kind of know what you're getting when you go into a Jason Statham action movie, which is like a perfectly fine average action film. And I would say this is, fits that bill. So we're going to give Beekeeper, we're going to put that right next to Deadpool Wolverine in the C. All right, now we got to talk about Furiosa, a Mad Max saga. I thought the action in this movie ruled. I thought it was awesome. That sequence alone, the 10 to 12 minute stowaway sequence, was just, it is one of my favorite action set pieces of the year. It is like, leave it up to George Miller to always show us new things, show us things we've never seen before. And that whole stowaway sequence is thrilling. It's a blast. It's action-packed. It's a lot of fun. It's visceral. Man, that stowaway section alone made me want to go back and rewatch it in IMAX, and I did. And I enjoyed the hell out of it just as much the second time. But it's not even just a stowaway sequence. There's a great set piece that takes place later on in the film at the Bullet Farm with Chris Hemsworth that I thought was really fun. The opening 20 minutes, I don't know if you consider it an action set piece, I guess. It's more of like a chase. But yeah, that first 20-minute chase scene is so good. Like, I love that's how this movie starts. It's like ramping up, has a good pace to it. Yeah, Furiosa, when it comes to action, I thought was one of the standouts of the year. And again, just that stowaway sequence alone was one of my favorite action set pieces of 2024. So that being said, we're going to give the action in Furiosa in the A. All right, we can't forget about Will Smith, Martin Lawrence, and Bad Boys Ride or Die. Yeah, I kind of like Rebel Moon. I did not like this movie. I didn't like the action. I mean, this is a way better movie than Rebel Moon. But in terms of the action, again, none of the action really stood out to me. None of it was very memorable. It's just a bunch of shootouts with, no stakes. It's just kind of like action to seem cool. And yeah, I was bored for most of this movie when it comes to the action. Again, I'm trying to reflect on that movie. Like, there's the big 20-minute sequence at the end. A lot of cool cinematography. I'll give him that. But it's just long, continuous shootouts where I'm just like this would have been cool in the 90s or maybe in the 2000s. But this day and age, you gotta have something juicier than just a kind of standard by numbers, shootout. I don't think anything in this movie really, raised the bar when it comes to shootouts. It's just kind of like, all right, that was fine, I guess. So I'm going to be a little harsh today. If I'm being honest, I think this is a D. Again, I felt like I was going to fall asleep through most of the action in this movie, which is not good for an action film. All right, next up is Argyle. And just like the Beekeeper, do you guys remember Argyle? Yeah, the movie has okay action, I suppose. None of the action really did it for me. It's very flashy, a lot of slow-mo, a lot of silly zaniness. Again, I want to make very clear that I know there's a huge audience for fun, over-the-top, zany action scenes, and I'm glad that people enjoy it. I'm glad that movies like this exist, so whet people's appetites. But for me, I'm just not that type of audience. I tend to check out when people are flying around in slow-mo and doing backflips and music's playing and people are driving on rooftops and CGI stuff. That's what this movie was. It felt like a cartoon. The moment an action scene feels cartoonish is the moment I just check out. I'm just like, this is stupid. Whether it's getting into a shootout while skating on oil, stuff or oil skating, I guess you can call it. There's just a lot of silliness in this movie. And again, I think there are people out there who enjoy that kind of stuff. I am not one of them. I am not the target audience for this movie. So for me, the action was pretty dull and kind of boring. So again, this one's going right in the D. Sorry, Argyle. All right, Dev Patel's in the building with Monkey Man. Yeah, I thought this movie, when it pertains to action, was fantastic. Man, that piece that lasts 15 to 20 minutes is a blast. There's also a sequence in the middle of the film where his character is running away and he gets into an axe fight in an apartment building. And yeah, the action in this movie is gritty, it's raw, it's in your face, it's dirty, it's sloppy in the best way possible. It's not a clean, John Wicky, flashy kind of movie. It's very handheld, very gritty. And I loved this movie when it comes to the action, particularly the last 15, 20 minutes. I think Dev Patel kills it. I thought he was fantastic. I want to see him do more action films. Please give this guy an action franchise. I think he would kill it. So for me, I thought this movie was very memorable when it came to its action. There are many sequences I want to revisit. So yeah, and there's emotion behind it. It's not just action for action's sake. There are character motivations. There are stakes involved. There's a lot going on in the action of this movie than just cool choreography and cool cinematography. Yeah, Monkey Man, fantastic. One of my favorite action films of the year, and we're gonna give Monkey Man an A. Okay, The Fall Guy, a movie that everyone loved, but yet no one saw, which is a shame because I think this movie is a lot of fun. Not even just the action, just the movie as a whole is, I think this movie is a blast. But yeah, when it comes to the action, this movie is actually a celebration of action. It's a celebration of stunts. And yeah, there's some great stunt work in this movie, memorable set pieces. There's a chase scene that takes place in the middle of the movie that's a lot of fun. You see in the trailers, it's like a construction truck he's on, and he's like spinning around, getting into fist fights. Yeah, a lot of stuff in the beginning of the movie. The last set piece, last 20 minutes is just an action extravaganza. Yeah, there's a lot to love about Fall Guy when it comes to the action. I wouldn't say that it's like anything like, oh my god, memorable. I need to rewatch this right now to experience that again. I don't think it's anything like that, but the action that is in the movie, while though not grand and the best thing I've ever seen, is still entertainment. It's still entertaining. It's still fun. Yeah, so we're going to give Fall Guys action here as an action film. We're going to give it a B. That Fall Guy is a solid B. All right, next up is Netflix's Rebel Ridge. Yeah, this one is weird because on one hand, this isn't like an action-packed, balls to the walls, fight movie or shootout movie. It's very slow. It's a movie that takes its time and it builds and it builds. But when action is released, it is so good. It is so good. It's realistic. It's grounded. I'm invested in the characters. I'm invested in what's happening. Even if the fight scenes aren't that long, which I actually kind of appreciate. I think action scenes these days are way too long. They could be shorter. And I felt that Rebel Ridge had a great balance of like having action but not too long. It's like the action in this movie is very quick. It's very fast paced. And yeah, that last climax of the movie that takes place at the sheriff's office is so good. There's so many like cool moments in that set piece because our character doesn't like to kill people, and so his whole thing is to de-escalate situations. And so instead of him just going all double-fisted handgun shooting everybody, shooting all the villains, he's like running around and de-escalating the situation and making it harder for them to get him. I don't know. I thought that was such a cool, fun, unique way to shoot action and to present action. So for me personally, I would give Rebel Ridge a B. That's not quite an A, but yeah, I thought Rebel Ridge was a solid, fun action film that was giving me things I've never really quite seen before when it comes to like how a protagonist, how an action hero can handle action. Okay, then there's the Juggernaut, the Twilight of the Warriors Walled In. This movie is awesome. This movie rules. It kicks ass. It has great fight choreography. It's filmed beautifully. It has great characters, a fun story, even if the story is a little familiar, but man, the fight scenes of this movie are so awesome. I want to rewatch this again. I can't wait to rewatch it. This movie is a blast. There's some like, this is another thing where it's like I was criticizing, when action scenes become cartoonish, I tend to check out. And there are moments in Twilight of the Warriors where it does become cartoonish. But in this particular case, I didn't check out and I wasn't, rubbed the wrong way by it because the choreography was so good that I didn't mind that it became cartoonish. Like if the action scene becomes cartoonish and it's just kind of like dull and whatever, then I'm like, I give up. But at least if the choreography is cool enough to justify the zaniness, then I'm all in. And I was all in for this movie. This movie is phenomenal. If you are a fan of martial art films and you have not seen this movie, please put this high on your list to watch. It is one of the best action films of 2024. And yeah, I'm going to put it in, I don't know if it's S. I don't know. This is tough. I'm going to go A. I don't know if it's S. Okay, we're rounding out. We got one left, and that is Twisters. I was pretty hyped on this movie. I loved Twister. I grew up on Twister. I saw it multiple times in theaters. I thought it had phenomenal action scenes. At least when I was younger. I haven't watched it as an adult. So I was really looking forward to Twisters. And to be honest, I was pretty let down by the action in this film. I was never really on the edge of my seat. I never really cared about what was going on. Not to say that anything was bad in the movie. Like I understood, it's shot well. I understood where everyone was. I understood what was going on. I understood the stakes involved. But like, I don't know. It just felt like a been there, done that. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel new or fresh or interesting. Which is, I know, kind of a weird critique because how much can you improve upon a movie about people chasing Twister? But I don't know. I feel like they could have done something different, something better, something on the edge of your seat. But I just didn't feel like anything in this movie was on the edge of my seat type of stuff. Again, not that it's bad. It was just kind of like, it was fine. So we're gonna put Twisters in the C. Yeah, so okay, so that's all the ones that I picked. Obviously, there are so many action movies that come out in a year. These are just the 13 that I just kind of chose and wanted to talk about. There are a couple action movies I didn't get a chance to see. I didn't see Borderlands. I didn't see The Crow. There's a couple Netflix films I didn't get a chance to watch. So if there's a movie on here that's not on this list that I didn't cover, it's probably because I didn't see it or maybe I forgot about it. But yeah, I kind of want to throw all this back to you. Do you like this list? Do you agree with this list? What are some of what are some of your favorite action films of the year? What are some of your favorite set pieces from the year? Not even just the movie. Like, what are some of the set pieces you really loved? I would love to know your thoughts. And thank you guys so much for watching. And until the next time, I will see you on the next one.